and interesting historical content. This is the Friendly Neighborhood History Channel, and if you have joined us in the past for our live streams, you know that Sundays is our live stream lecture. Fridays and Saturday nights, we answer any of your questions. We have a lot of fun doing that. We had some great live streams this weekend that I really enjoyed. It was great to get all the questions and feedback and support from the channel and everything. And today is the day when I do my live stream lecture and I discuss a particular historical topic that either somebody recommends or it's just come up to me in the past and stuff like that. So today it's my topic that I'm choosing, and I am choosing to discuss the 30 Years' War. So I will be talking about that. Now, I am, as you might be able to hear and tell, a little bit under the weather. I'm fighting back a fever. I think I've just been going so long with this relocation that I'm now kind of collapsing from it. So I'm all bundled up in my blanket and in my smoking jacket to try to give you some quality history content for my live stream lecture. I've got some coffee, grab some coffee, something warm or nice to drink. And as I suspected, I was right all along. And if you like learning about history, then you're in the right place. Thank you for joining us on the Friendly Neighborhood History Channel. Consider liking and subscribing, growing the channel, and all of that great stuff. I won't be interacting as much with the chat as I usually do in the live stream lecture, but I will be discussing one of the most important wars that you've probably never heard of, the 30 Years' War and everything. And I think that'll be a lot of fun. I think everyone will really enjoy that. Check out the channel where I'm doing a series right now on the Chinese imperial dynasties and things like that. And also I also do daily content about what happened on this day in history, who died today in history, who was born today in history. It's what we do here at the Friendly Neighborhood History Channel. And so I am, due to not feeling my best, going to only go for a half hour today. The show must go on, but we're going to cut it in half. And I think we can get through most of the history of the war in half an hour. And if we need to go over, we need to go over. But I was really looking forward to this topic, and I really didn't want to miss out on it. And I really didn't want you to miss out on me talking about it to you. So if you enjoy learning about history and the history of Europe or the history of wars, you are in the right place. Consider liking and subscribing. And hopefully I will be feeling better and everything. I think I've just been going. I was full of energy yesterday, and I kind of just collapsed with a bad fever last night. I've been fighting it back all day, trying to recover my strength and bring some quality history content to use. And by the way, the ambient noises in the background, if you're hearing anything, I'm in my open air new relocated studio. And this is and we've got, it's kind of more of an added room, and the walls are thin. The roof is thin. It's really nice. I really love the ambiance. It gets really cold here at night and really warm here during the day. But we've also got a rainstorm hitting this area right now. So if you're hearing all of that noise, that is a rainstorm. So hopefully you enjoy some nice ambient rain noises along with me talking about some history, the history of the 30 Years' War, which we'll be discussing for the next half hour or so. Usually I'd go an hour, but I'm not feeling too well. But I wanted to talk about this topic nonetheless. So the 30 Years' War is probably the best war or the most important war that you've never heard about. Some people, now, if you like history like I do, then obviously you're in the right place, so like and subscribe. But also, the 30 Years' War might be familiar to you. But a lot of people, even history experts, don't know an awful lot about that war. And so that is what I'm going to be doing in bringing it to you. So if you enjoy learning about history, again, you're in the right place. Consider liking and subscribing, all of that good stuff. And if you want more exclusive content, I have a Patreon. If you want to listen, if you don't like my voice, but you like reading, consider joining my Substack, where I post articles and blogs and commentaries. So hello and welcome to the Friendly Neighborhood History Channel. You are joining us for our live stream lecture that we have every Sunday at 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. We were not able to have ours last week, and even though I'm not feeling too great, I really wanted to talk about this topic with you guys. So I really hope you will enjoy learning about the 30 Years' War and its impact on European and world history. So the 30 Years' War, let's start with the background. It couldn't have happened without another huge historical event, which you're probably a little more familiar with, the Protestant Reformation. And living in the United States and having a large amount of people in my channel from the United States, most Americans are Protestant Christians of some variety or another. And because of that, Protestant Reformation obviously means something to them in some way, shape, or form. And it has its cultural identity and psychological mark on the West, and particularly the United States, with America being a mainly Protestant Christian nation throughout most of its history. So I'll give you a quick background on that. The Protestant Reformation started in 1517 with Martin Luther obviously posting the 95 Theses on the church door in Wittenberg, Germany. And after he did this, it obviously led to a bunch of splits within the Catholic Church in Western Europe, where Lutherans and Calvinists and other groups of Christians who believe different things about the Bible emerged, basically denying the authority of the Pope and the authority of the kings to do what the Pope said, and basically snubbing their nose at the Catholic Church, the largest institution in the Western world at the time. So this obviously, back then, the idea of many Europeans was that if somebody had wrong beliefs, they were not only dangerous in the present, but they were dangerous in eternity. This is called sacralism. The idea that if somebody is dangerous, is spreading false doctrine, that could send people to hell forever. So the best thing to do is to actually kill them, because if you kill them in warfare or in execution, or you burn them at the stake or things like this, you may save the souls of other people. This person's soul is already lost. And so this happened on both sides, of Protestants and Catholics killing each other in systematic and judicial executions in different regions of Europe, as well as in warfare. So there were certain areas of Europe that became predominantly Protestant, large parts of Germany, as well as Sweden, Denmark, England, and the Netherlands, as well, and and Switzerland. There were movements in places like France and Spain, but in France and the Holy Roman Empire, which is modern day Germany, and Austria, but they hadn't gotten too far. Germany was kind of divided with a lot of different Protestant areas called provinces, and a lot of different Catholic areas also called provinces. So basically the what so basically you had this divide between Catholics and Protestants, and by 15 and the wars started piling up, and the bodies started piling up, and you had devastation. France basically fought most of the second half of the 16th century in these wars, called the French Wars of Religion, which were extremely brutal, and many French people died, and it was really awful. So that happened, but also the growing influence of Protestantism obviously undermined the authority and power of the Catholic Church, and made the Catholics really stressed out and self conscious. And they used their most powerful engines in Europe to continue to repress the Protestants. This included the Kingdom of France, the Spanish, who had built a New World Empire in North and South America, and of course the Holy Roman Empire, which was run by the same guy for a while, who was also the King of Spain. This was a royal family called the Habsburgs, and the Habsburgs were staunchly Catholic and believed very strongly in Catholicism and in persecuting Protestants, because, again, the idea was if a Protestant was endangering your soul, that made them more dangerous, and that was a justification to kill them so that they wouldn't take other people to hell with them. They'd be in hell forever, but maybe other people wouldn't have to hear their blasphemous ideas. Nowadays, Protestants and Catholics basically get along and agree that there might be some differences, but they are Christians who worship Jesus Christ. So, um, anyways, thank you, Kevin. I really appreciate you saying the channel is awesome. I happen to agree. But anyways, so the Protestant Reformation had spread throughout Europe, with many German princes and leaders deciding to get away from the Holy Roman Empire and its influence over Germany and the German-speaking states, because there was no Germany at this time, and basically allying themselves with mainly with Martin Luther's Lutheran ideas. Meanwhile, Switzerland formed its own kind of republic, led by figures like Ulrich Zwingli and John Calvin. And the Calvinists became one of the most predominant Protestant groups in Europe, believing that God chose who was saved and who was not. A group of Calvinist Protestants went to France and became known as the Huguenots, and they were persecuted heavily by the French king. And the Protestant Reformation spread to England when King Henry VIII wanted to get a divorce, and he basically the Pope wouldn't allow him to get a divorce, so he basically declared that he was the head of the Church of England, and the Church of England, the Anglican Church or the Episcopal Church in the United States, was created by Henry VIII breaking off from the Catholic Church. And even though Henry VIII really didn't care about religion, a bunch of his subjects did, and they embraced Protestant ideas. So Protestantism became popular in England and Scotland. It spread, the Lutheran ideas spread to Denmark and Norway and Scandinavian countries. And so the Swedish and the Danes had become two very powerful kingdoms in Northern Europe that were very staunchly Protestant by the 1550s. Why is the 55th? And of course, you still had France repressing Protestants, and you had different German areas having more Protestants or more Catholics. The fighting continued until there was an agreement made between Catholics and Protestants in 1555 that rather than depopulate Europe by basically killing everybody, they decided they decided that the sorry, I'm blanking out. They decided that instead of depopulating Europe because of all these religious wars between Catholic and Protestant, that they would make an agreement, and they made the agreement at a peace called the Peace of Augsburg in 1555. And that agreement was between Lutherans and Catholics, where basic and Calvinists weren't really allowed in and were continually persecuted. But the truth of the matter is that the agreement was "Cuius regio, ius religio." It was and that's Latin, and that means whoever rules his religion. So if you were in a German state, which might be a county or something like that, and your duke or earl or baron or prince was a Catholic, that region was Catholic and friendly to Catholics. If your king was Protestant, like in England, then the region was Protestant. And that was the basic understanding throughout the late part of the 16th century. However, this did not stop the religious wars between um, the basically what was I saying? Basically, the Protestants and Catholics continued to fight with each other, and it didn't stop even after this agreement, where it was basically said, if we don't stop, we're going to end up killing each other. And the 30 Years' War was the biggest part of this. Meanwhile, the Netherlands, modern day Holland, was part of the Spanish sphere of influence. The Spanish had built a large New World empire, and of course, they had the largest and richest kingdom in Europe. And a lot of people really worried about the extent and influence of the Spanish Empire, and the Dutch had embraced Calvinism. They had embraced Protestantism. So they were chafing under their Catholic overlords because the Spanish were staunchly Catholic. Um, the truth of the matter is that this led the Netherlands to rebel against the Catholics in 1568, which started what's called the 80 Years' War. Now, before I go any further, the Europeans definitely love their number of wars. You have the 30 Years' War, you have the 7 Years' War, you have the 8 Years' War, the 9 Years' War, the 30 Years' War, the 80 Years' War. I know I said 30 Years' War, the 100 Years' War. The Europeans love to put numbers, usually semi-round numbers, around their wars that happen all over the place. But the 80 Years' War is actually part of the 30 Years' War. Or should I say the 30 Years' War is actually part of the 80 Years' War. So for 80 years, the Protestants in the Netherlands, who were influenced by John Calvin's ideas about predestination, were doing everything they possibly could to snub the Spanish and overthrow the yoke of the Spanish king. And this lasted for a long time, the Dutch Revolt, as it is called, and they went back and forth, usually fighting in the lowlands, which is the lower part of the Netherlands, which is now Belgium, which was highly contested between the Catholic Spanish and the Dutch. The northern part gained its independence sooner. However, for 80 years, and as part of the 30 Years' War, the Dutch and the Spanish are constantly fighting, so keep that in mind. Then we get to what caused the 30 Years' War. Well, there was a region in the Holy Roman Empire which covers not just Germany, but parts of Austria, Czechoslovakia, Switzerland. Basically, that modern Central Europe is basically dominated by the Holy Roman Empire. And the Holy Roman Emperor doesn't have huge amounts of political power. He is an elected official with more ceremonial power than anything else. But he does have a blessing of the Pope, extreme amounts of wealth, and can lead armies into battle. And so he is obviously a frightening and powerful figure who could really be very dangerous. But part of the Holy Roman Empire is the state or the province or principality of Bohemia, and Bohemia is the modern day Czech Republic. Now, Bohemia had always had a Protestant tinge to it ever since Jan Hus, a Protestant reformer, a proto-Protestant reformer, was killed 100 years before Martin Luther. He was leading the Bohemians away from the Catholic Church and away from the Holy Roman Empire. So 2 centuries later, the Bohemians are still rebelling. Many of them have become Protestants, and they don't want anything to do with the Holy Roman Empire. So the Holy Roman Emperor sends ministers to the capital of Bohemia, Prague, which is the capital of the modern-day Czech Republic, which throughout the 20th century was known as Czechoslovakia. And basically, they decide to set up in a meeting to work out their differences. But the Bohemians don't want to hear the Holy Roman Emperor's ambassadors, so they take them and they throw them out a window. This is called a defenestration. It's called the first defenestration of Prague because apparently this happened a lot, where people were literally thrown out of windows because they were dirty, filthy Catholics, or people were killed because they were dirty, filthy Protestants. This was part of Europe. This was the mentality that dominated Europe. Violence in the temporary is better than eternal damnation. Remember that. So, because of that, you've got a continual issue between this obviously causes the Holy Roman Empire to be outraged. The Holy Roman Emperor becomes absolutely furious at this because he believes, I believe it's Ferdinand II, and he is absolutely incensed by this because he feels that they are a province within his empire and they should respect him and they shouldn't be throwing people out of windows, which he's probably right about the last part, but they didn't want to respect him because he was a Catholic and they were Protestants. Again, the war is starting out as a Protestant versus Catholic thing, and this starts the first phase of the war. He tells the Czechs to apologize and give in. The Bohemians refuse, and this leads to the first part of the war called the Bohemian phase, which lasts for 7 years, 1618 to 1625. During this time, the Bohemians try to rally as many of the other Protestant principalities and mini kingdoms and duchies and dukedoms and things like that throughout Germany to try to defeat the Holy Roman Empire. They don't get really far, and they are also appealing to the Protestant countries, Denmark, Sweden, and England. Denmark, Sweden, and England are sitting this one out for now. But the Bohemians really don't have a chance against the Holy Roman Empire and its massive armies and its funding. And of course, they have the blessing of the Pope, who still oversees all of the Catholic institutions in Europe. So at the same time, the Holy Roman Empire links up with the Spanish, who are these are Habsburg rulers. That's the family who rule both Spain and the Holy Roman Empire. So they're related to each other, and they're both Catholic, so they're going to help each other. So the war brings in the Dutch, and it brings in the Spanish. So the Dutch and the Spanish are going to be involved in the 30 Years' War from here on out, and they're not going to be. They're going to be doing their own thing, obviously fighting over the freedom of the Netherlands. But at the same time, they're going to be sending troops and advisors and funds whenever they can to help either the Bohemians, that'd be the Netherlands, the Protestants helping each other, or the Holy Roman Empire, the Austrians, because the Holy Roman Emperor was also the Emperor of Austria at this time. And Austria is an empire with a ruler who isn't elected, and he can say whatever he wants and do whatever he wants, basically. I know it might sound a little bit confusing, but Ferdinand II is not only the Holy Roman Empire, he's also in charge of the Austrian Empire, which rules over a large segment of um, of Central Europe, and also has regions that are in the Holy Roman Empire, if that makes sense. So, and yes, the Holy Roman Empire, as Voltaire would later point out, was neither holy nor Roman nor an empire. When you have an elected official who is supposed to be your emperor, and it is in Germany and not in Italy, and it is the church really doesn't control it the way it wants to. It's not holy, so it's neither holy nor Roman nor an empire. That aside, basically the war goes very badly for the Bohemians as they are continually defeated by great fighters like von Wallenstein and Tilly, who are two of the the Austrians' best generals, and they're able to basically eviscerate the Bohemian forces, but not before they get the attention of the Danish under King Christian IV. King Christian IV decides that he is going to go into the Holy Roman. He is going to avenge the Bohemians. In 1625, the Bohemians, all of a region is captured, and all of the other people who are fighting, like the Brandenburg Prussians and the Provolone, I think it was called. There was a couple of kingdoms that in Germany that were helping the Bohemians against the Catholic Holy Roman Empire. But Christian IV is going to become the predominant leader of this next phase of the war, which is called the Danish phase, because that's when Denmark gets involved in the war. And Denmark at this time is not just the small country that we know it today with Greenland. They own Iceland, they own Norway, they have a large northern empire in northern Europe, and they have a lot of forces at their disposal, and they are staunchly Protestant. So they are able to send large amounts of forces into the Holy Roman Empire and fight against them. However, great generals like von Wallenstein and Tilly are able to basically send them back packing. And the Danes fight admirably, but they don't have the forces, manpower, or wealth of the Holy Roman Empire. At the same time, places like Saxony and Brandenburg get involved in the fight against the Holy Roman Empire, but they're not able to help too much. And all the while, the 80 Years' War is continuing with the Dutch and the Spanish continuing to fight each other. So, hold on one second. Let me take a sip of coffee. If you're liking what you're learning about, then you're in the right place. If you like history, you're in the right place. Consider liking and subscribing. Thank you. Anyways, so what happens next? The Bohemians are knocked out, and the Danes get knocked out pretty quickly, and King Christian is forced to retreat in 1630. So the war has been going on for 12 years now. It's now 62 years in the war between the Netherlands and the Spanish, and it looks like the Catholics have won, and they've sent back the Protestant forces. Well, it's time for the Swedish to get involved. The English never really get involved. They send some aid and help, but the English are never going to be really involved in this war. And this is obviously something that we see throughout English or British history, is that because it's an island nation away from Europe, it sometimes wants to be involved in European affairs and sometimes it wants to be on its own thing. And if you don't think that has modern geopolitical implications, then look at Brexit. That's England, Great Britain, deciding that it doesn't want to be part of the issues of the European continent. And that has been a back and forth in English foreign policy for the last 1,000 years, basically. And it was prevalent here, where the King of England is already dealing with his own issues, King Charles I. He's continually fighting with Parliament. And because he's fighting with Parliament so much, he eventually causes a civil war, which sees him overthrown and executed, which I talked about on the live stream lecture last Monday. So go check that out. But basically, the English are going to send some aid and backup, but they're not going to get involved in the fighting. Spain is still fighting and still sending support to the Holy Roman Empire. The Danish have been knocked out of the war. The Bohemians have been fully conquered by the Holy Roman Empire, and now it's time for the Swedish, the other major power in Northern Europe, to come into the conflict. They have been fighting a war with the Polish with Lithuanian Commonwealth, and believe it or not, in the 17th century, the 1600s, the Poland and Sweden were two of the most powerful European countries there were, and were oftentimes at odds with each other because Poland was Catholic and Sweden was Protestant. So, this war, by the way, is going to be considered one of the last major religious wars because after a century and a half of fighting since the Protestant Reformation began, Catholics and Protestants decided to stop fighting each other for religion and start fighting each other for wealth, power, and land. And so, there's going to be a slow but steady increase in tolerance between these two Christian sects throughout the rest of the early modern period after this war. At the same time, the Holy Roman Empire, it seems like it's about to be undefeated, and it's been really powerful. It's been really strong. Ferdinand has the best generals. However, he dismisses one of them because he's worried that von Wallenstein is actually trying to get his job and trying to usurp him. And because he's paranoid, he dismisses him and then later has him assassinated. Then Tilly is killed in a battle against the Swedish. So the major commanders who were helping the Holy Roman Empire smash the Bohemians and then the Danish aren't there for the Swedish, and the Swedish have more manpower, more forces, and because the king is the head of the church, just like in England, and because they're staunchly Protestant, it's easier to recruit forces and raise funds, as taxes have a religious connotation as well as the drafting of manpower. So, with more manpower available, and with better generals, and with the loss of generals on the Holy Roman Empire side, you can look at it and the Swedish have a better advantage. And so for the next 5 years, the Swedish phase of the war is going to happen. So far we had the Bohemian phase, 1618 to 1625, which started when guys were thrown out of a window and ended with the Bohemians being conquered by the Holy Roman Empire. Then you have the Danish phase, where the Danes did everything they could to halt the Holy Roman Empire's progress in oppressing the German Protestants, and that ended with disaster for the Protestants. But the Swedish are going to flip the script on the Holy Roman Empire, and they are going to successfully win huge battles like Breitenwald, which is the major battle of the war. So the truth of the matter is that as the war goes on, you can see a toll is starting to be taken by the Holy Roman Empire. War fatigue is setting in. They've been fighting for 15 years almost, and they're going to start losing their advantage compared to the previous phases of the war. So the third phase is clearly won by the Protestants, with the Swedish again, again defeating the Holy Roman Empire. Now, France, I haven't talked about much because France has actually had its fingers in this pie in a more subtle way. Now, France is a Catholic country, and it's considered one of the leading Catholic countries in the continent. But this is what changes the war from a religious war to a war about politics and power. The French are horrified at the power of the Habsburgs, their control over Spain, their control over Austria, and their dominance in the Holy Roman Empire. So, starting with the Danish phase, and especially during the Swedish phase, they start sending funds to the Protestants, to the Danish, and then to the Swedish, to defeat the Holy Roman Empire, because they believe that the Holy Roman Empire has gotten too powerful, and it doesn't matter that they're Catholic. That doesn't matter so much anymore. What really matters is conquering your enemy. So, what happens next? So the French are under the leadership of King Louis XIII, who is an extremely good king, and he is overshadowed by his son, who will be King Louis XIV, who deserves his own live stream lecture because he's such an important historical figure. I think I have talked about him on a live stream lecture before. But Louis XIII is a really powerful king, really formidable, and he is under the advice and the sway of a man named Cardinal Richelieu. And Cardinal Richelieu is one of history's most powerful and cunning figures. And he, despite being a prelate in the church, is going to do everything in his power to back up, to undermine the Holy Roman Empire, even if it means helping Protestants. He doesn't care so much about religion, even though he's a cardinal. He cares more about the political standing and the power and wealth of the French kingdom. At the same time, there's another cardinal fighting the war, Cardinal Infante. He is a Spanish king, he is a Spanish general and cardinal prelate who is fighting the Dutch and winning a bunch of battles against them around the same time. So the French are going to do everything in their power to help out the Swedish during the war, and the war seems to be turning against the Holy Roman Empire and the Spanish in a big way. Meanwhile, the Dutch continue to hold out, even though they're very small compared to the Spanish, who of course have a new world empire that they can tap into for resources anytime they want. So it looks like so surprisingly, the Dutch are holding on, and also surprisingly, you have the Holy Roman Empire really starting to struggle against the Swedish. The Swedish win battle after battle until 1635, when their king, Gustavus Adolphus, Gustavus II, who is one of the most well known kings in Swedish history and basically represents Sweden at its most military and politically powerful in its history, is killed in a battle. Because of that, the Swedish kind of flee. They don't have the leadership and power and strength to continue fighting. They don't have what Gustavus II was able to bring to them, being able to dominate the battlefield against the Holy Roman Empire. Because that happens, the war swings back in favor of the Holy Roman Empire. And if you're confused and lost, then I don't blame you at all. But I'll just recap what's happened so far. The Bohemians threw a bunch of ambassadors from the Holy Roman Empire out the window because they were Catholic and they didn't want to be ruled by the Catholics. This caused a revolt in Bohemia that was crushed by the Holy Roman Empire. That's the first phase of the war, the Bohemian phase from 1618 to 1625. Then in 1625, the Danish, not wanting the Catholics to win so easily, their Lutheran Protestants, storm into the Holy Roman Empire with the help of German principalities that are Protestant and do everything they can to undermine the Holy Roman Empire. They fight admirably, but they're no match for the Holy Roman Empire's forces, and they are sent packing back to Denmark. Then in 1630, the Swedish show up, and they actually turn the tide completely in their favor with the help of the French, who want to undermine the Holy Roman Empire because they don't want them to be too powerful. And the Swedish actually are doing pretty well until their king is killed and they're forced to retreat. Meanwhile, the Netherlands is fighting for its independence and autonomy against the Spanish, and the Spanish are helping the Holy Roman Empire. So maybe that's a quick summary. So you had the Bohemian phase during the first 7 years of the war, then the Danish phase for the next 5 years of the war, then you had the Swedish phase for 5 years after that. Okay. Next, you have the last phase of the war, the French phase of the war. Cardinal Richelieu and King Louis XIII decide that instead of just helping and aiding the Protestants, maybe it's time to actually get involved in the actual fighting itself. And they'll do it basically like Thanos, we'll do it ourselves. They get involved by attacking the Holy Roman Empire, but they have to deal with the Spanish forces that are in the neighboring Netherlands. And so Cardinal Infante invades France, and the French are actually pretty capable of defeating the Holy Roman Empire and the Spanish forces over and over again. At the same time, the Barcelonian region of Spain, Catalonia, breaks off and declares its allegiance to France and fights against the Spanish, while the Portuguese, who want to undermine the Spanish, despite the fact that they are also Catholic, join forces with the French. So the French and Portuguese are fighting against the Spanish and the Holy Roman Empire, and the Dutch are continually fighting against the Spanish. So this war has taken a huge toll on the Habsburgs, on the Spanish, and on the Holy Roman Empire, and it seems like things are starting to really kind of go out of control for Europe. And the killing is obviously barbaric and awful. In 1642, Cardinal Richelieu dies, and soon afterwards, King Louis XIII dies. And then they decide that they fought the war for too long. It's been going on for 25 years. And starting in 1646, they start making negotiations to actually end the war and stop the fighting. The blood that has been spilled is obviously catastrophic, and many and hundreds of thousands have died, especially in the Holy Roman Empire, who has lost a lot of its power and strength because so many of its people have either died fighting in the war, been killed as civilian targets during the fighting between the Dutch and between the Danish and the Swedish and the Holy Roman Empire and the French, or they have been plundered and all of their supplies have been taken, so they've starved to death. Because many of these people are peasants and farmers and rely on their food. Well, when food is seized by the army, you have no choice but to starve to death. So the Holy Roman Empire is highly depopulated. It has been fighting longer than anyone else, and it is very weak compared to the French and to the others. But the French aren't able to break through against the Spanish or the Holy Roman Empire. So eventually, a series of treaties, like the Treaty of Munster and Ostenbrock, are designed where the Swedish and the French make peace with the Holy Roman Empire, and and Spain makes peace with the Dutch, giving the Dutch their independence, ending the 80 Years' War, and allowing the Dutch to go free. At the same time, um, the French gain land in the Holy Roman Empire, as do the Swedish, with the Holy Roman Empire basically having to admit that it lost the war, and the Dutch gained their independence from the Spanish. So it's a win for the Protestants. It's a win for the Catholics in France, as opposed to the Catholics in Austria and Germany. And there is now this understanding that this war, despite being a religious war, took on a political tone, and that the real thing that matters are are all these regions that fought in the war, all of these principalities and little kingdoms and duchies and things like that, as well as the larger kingdoms. And so this establishes the Peace of Westphalia, which is what these treaties are called, in 1648, 30 years after the war began, establishes what is known today as the nation state. Basically, a region is sovereign and autonomous on its own, and it can't be bullied by other countries. And this is the beginning of modern diplomacy in Europe. So, after all of this has gone on, the French are the more have become the predominant country. They're continually fighting the war with Spain, that they will continue to try to bully Spain. Is in decline. The Holy Roman Empire loses its stranglehold on being the most powerful kingdom in Europe. England at this time is not involved in the war that much, but they're too busy overthrowing and executing their king, Charles the First. At the same time, um, the Swedish are going to gain more influence in the continent and more power, as are the Brandenburg Prussians, who will eventually become the Prussians, who will eventually unite all of these principalities and little kingdoms into the country of Germany in the 1870s. So it's going to be another 2.5 centuries until Germany, which is now known as the Holy Roman Empire, which also includes places like Czechoslovakia and Austria, is going to be one cohesive state. The Holy Roman Empire is going to be in decline until it eventually is Napoleon basically does away with it in 1805, thinking that it's superfluous. And so European politics and warfare has changed. And this, although there are continual fights between Protestants and Catholics, this is basically the end of the wars of religion. The French wars of religion had torn that country apart in the late 16th century. This war had torn all of Central Europe apart, and now the Dutch are a sovereign, independent country. And because they are so small and sea based, they are relying on a mercantile sea trading empire that will develop throughout the rest of the 1600s, which will make them very, very wealthy and powerful. So the Dutch and the Swedish are going to have an inordinate amount of influence throughout the rest of the 17th century, as are unsurprisingly the French. The Holy Roman Empire is going to decline. Spain is going to decline. This is probably the beginning of the end of Spanish dominance over the continent, which had started since 1492, when they had sent Columbus across the ocean blue. So that is a quick history of the war, the 30 Years' War. One more thing about it that's interesting that might tickle your fancy if you're interested in horror and true crime and superstition is that a huge target of many people at this time are very superstitious, and they have to create a scapegoat and target for why they are suffering through such a horrible calamity as this war, in which there's mass starvation, mass murder, plunder, and other horrible things that I don't even want to talk about on YouTube are going on. Well, they decide that it is God punishing them, which is a common theme of the medieval and early modern world. This war is actually going to be the beginning of the end, the idea that God is punishing you, and that's why this war is happening. And also, it's going to be the beginning of the end of need to kill you because you're a Catholic or a Protestant, and you're going to spread deception that will send people to hell. That cost too many lives during the 1500s and 1600s. So now it's much more easy just to hate each other and despise the other religions without killing each other and saying they're going and trying to keep them from sending more people supposedly to hell. So there's a rising enterprise and opportunity for religious toleration, albeit very, very primitive compared to modern religious toleration. Um, at the same time, witches become the biggest targets of the superstition, with people believing that God is punishing them for the war. They believe that there must be something that is being done, some great evil or sin that has warranted God's judgment through this war, which has killed so many civilians. And by the way, something just a quick aside, back then it was women and children especially were considered sensitive targets, but people did not care about civilian deaths the way they do today. Civilian deaths, which have marked so many of the understandings of our wars in places like Vietnam, Iraq, and now Gaza, between Israel and Hamas, really didn't matter that much in the 1630s and 1640s. People didn't care if civilians were dying. All they cared about was, were they winning the war or not. So interestingly enough, witches become the main target as people blame them for basically bringing about the wrath of God and the punishment of God during this time. And so the persecution of witches, which was already prevalent and part of the Inquisition, which is when the church put people on trial, the Catholic Church, becomes even more predominant in the Catholic southern part of Germany and as well as in the rest of the area by Protestants as well. And this is obviously going to influence affairs across the continent. So throughout the rest of the 1600s, persecution of witches for causing calamity is going to happen all throughout the continent and in England. And that's going to spread to English colonies established in the New World, which were established around this time, by the way, the first several of them. And that's going to lead to the Salem witch trials that you probably know about in 1692, which deserves its own live stream lecture. So the superstition and fear of witches and warlocks is obviously huge during the 1600s, and it is seen as a calamitous reason for why this scourging has happened, rather than just the natural affairs of religious and then political wars happening because people want land, power, wealth, and to be right. And the best way to determine if you're right in the early 1600s about religion is who's God? Will God let you win, or will God let those dirty Protestants win, or will God let those filthy Catholics win? So, anyways, that is my summation of the 30 Years' War. I hope you've enjoyed listening to it, and I'm actually feeling okay. It was actually invigorating. I've been dealing with a fever and everything, and obviously, I think I'm just exhausted from the whole forced relocation that we've been doing here. This is our new studio, by the way. If you watch a live stream lecture from last month, you will not see me here. But because of that, I think I've just been running around doing so much that I actually collapsed with a fever, and it's been bad. And I just bundled myself up. And by the way, those ambient, albeit annoying noises in the background, this is kind of an open air studio. So that is obviously the rain outside. So hopefully that gave you some nice ASMR when you were listening to this live stream lecture. But I actually feel a lot better having gone through a live stream lecture and actually getting through the content that I find to be so important. So, in in the spirit of that, I'm going to give 5 minutes of Q&A. So if anyone wants to ask any questions related to the 30 Years' War, European history, the Protestant Reformation, Catholicism, all of this stuff, or anything else that comes to your mind about history, social studies, and geography and things like that, please be sure to type it in the chat and drop it there right after you drop a like and subscribe to the channel. Our live stream lecture is over. I really appreciate everybody, your participation and learning about it. I hope I taught you something new today. And at the same time, if you have any questions for the next few minutes, I will be happy to answer them. We usually just reserve that for Fridays and Saturdays, but I'm feeling a little bit better and I'm feeling like I can take some questions and it'll continue to invigorate me. So thank you very much, everybody. I'm here for whatever questions you have regarding history and social studies, which is what we normally do Friday and Saturday nights. So I'm going to look through the chat here and see if there's any questions because people like questions. Let me see. Uh huh. Let me see. Orion was not listening to what I was talking about. I wasn't promoting any religion or anything like that. I was just talking about a religious war and its history and how it impacted Europe. Everything in the world belongs to America except the non-American parts. Indian, if you're still here, I hope you are. Was Diocletian a good Roman emperor or Gaius Caesar Augustus? My favorite dictator is Lucius Cornelius Sulla Felix. Well, Sulla was a populari who believed that the Roman citizens should be given more rights, opportunities, and a social safety net. Augustus is obviously the best Roman emperor. I don't think it's really debatable unless you want to do the Optimus Princeps, which is Trajan, who was an amazing conqueror and builder in his own right. Diocletian was pretty good. He didn't know how to handle the economy. And if you're a Christian, you may not like him because he persecuted the Christian church more heavily than any Roman emperor before or after. But he was a solid emperor. He established a tetrarchy where four different rulers split up the Roman Empire. He created an entire new bureaucracy, and he saved Rome from the fires of the third century crisis, where Roman emperors were basically killing each other, ruling for a year, and then being killed themselves, and the empire almost collapsed because of all the corruption and greed. So, um, facts, Roman Empire, thanks, Prussians. Yep, yep. I don't know what that is. Bro, go out and get some girls. The ladies love this. They love the smoking jacket and they love the friendly neighborhood history. What do I think about Israel? I think it exists. So, let me see here. Especially the Gulf. So, Gerald, you're commenting on the Gulf of America. And like I was saying yesterday on the channel, there's going to be some maps that say it, but they're probably going to be mainly made in the US. Britain has already said they won't say it. And I doubt the rest of Europe will call it the Gulf of America as well. Who knows? I think it's an interesting idea. I think obviously the Gulf of Mexico covers large amounts of land in America, but why not go with the traditional name? There really is no point in doing this other than just to flex American muscles. Um, Nubs, the Flavians created Christianity. No, they did not. You are thinking of Flavius Josephus, who wrote about Jesus of Nazareth and described him in his histories, and he was adopted by the Flavians and basically paid by them to actually to write histories. But no, the Flavians did not create Christianity. Christianity was around before the Flavians. Why am I wrong? So, by the way, Rodolfo, my wonderful moderator, give him some love in the chat. He's done a great job handling everything, and they did not create it. St. Paul was writing about was writing Christian doctrine in the 50s and 60s AD before the Flavians even came to power. Germany was less anti-Semitic than France. There's a lot of horrible anti-Semitism on both sides. The Italians, actually, during World War II, despite being allied to the Germans and everything, were hiding Jews, and there were many Jews that were hidden in the Vatican. Interestingly enough, but I don't have a problem reading it, but they didn't create Christianity. I'm not saying Christianity is true or not, but it wasn't created by the Flavians. And if it was created by the Flavians, why was it so heavily persecuted by one of the Flavians named Domitian? Christianity is the most persecuted. And if it was created by the Flavians, who was Nero persecuting? I'm just wondering. I'm not saying Christianity is true. I'm just saying historically, it's like when people say Jesus did not exist. I understand that you don't like the Christian religion, and that's perfectly fine, but that doesn't make it actually a fair statement. It's historical ignorance is historical ignorance. Ashkenaz is of a line of Gomer. I don't know what that doesn't have anything to do with what we're talking about, but okay. Oh, is a line of Gomer, not Shem. Are you referring to Ashkenazi, like European Jews? They're not of a line of Shem, which are Semites? That's not true. Could you combine storytelling and a history lecture? Well, I just did it, Nathan. I just did the whole live stream lecture about the 30 Years' War. So I do it every Sunday. And I'm thinking of a topic for next week, and I'm going to let one of my Patreonies select it. By the way, if you're interested in viewing more exclusive content, please, even if you don't agree, like Nub's Revenge hasn't agreed with me on what I'm saying, and that's perfectly okay. I appreciate you coming here and sharing your perspectives on history, wrong or incorrect or correct. It doesn't matter to me. As long as you're here participating, it means a lot. Yeah, I would have to look into that, Nubs, because I actually don't know about that, the dialect. So, but anyways, yes. So if you are interested in learning more about the content that I provide, think about joining my Patreon and things like that, where there's more exclusive content. And Steph, it's great to see you. Always a pleasure to have you here. I will take one more question if anyone has a question, but if you don't, you are free to, well, you are always free to leave, as people come and go all the time. You probably noticed. Like and subscribe, join the Friendly Neighborhood History channel, consider the Patreon. You don't have to be a paid member, but it would be nice. It would help us grow our brand and everything. Yes, Rodolfo, your statement is generally true. I think both of them, I think every European country has a lot of sins on their hands. I think Germany has the worst because of the Holocaust, but before that, excluding that, France is a little bit worse. Nubs, I enjoy you coming here and joining us. It's so always a pleasure to see you. And iron sharpens iron, as they say. So, but as I expected, when it came to the 30 Years' War, I was right all along. And I hope you enjoyed learning about the 30 Years' War. And I will take one more question if anyone has it. If not, I hope you all have a wonderful week, and I will be seeing you all Friday at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time for our next Q&A, Ask Me Anything, and then Saturday we'll be doing it again, and a live stream lecture topic next week I'm not even sure about. Well, you know what, I'm probably going to ask one of my wonderful Patreons, like I Love Music or Henry Wright or one of those people, or Ballet Peace, what they would like me to discuss in a live stream lecture. If you want to give an input on the content I produce, subscribing to the Patreon is one way to do that, or M for that matter. He probably would give me a good idea. Is scientific thinking similar to history thinking? Proof, evidence, question. Scientific thinking, and thanks for being here, Spartacus. I really appreciate you. Great to see you again. Is scientific thinking similar to history thinking? Proof, evidence, question. Yes, in some ways, history is a science in which you investigate and review and you create hypotheses. That's called historiography. So there is that, obviously. And I think science deals in fact and the question and the issues surrounding the facts and the interpretation of facts regarding the human being on the inside and the world and the literal world around them, whereas history deals with the facts and issues surrounding the human being and the mind and the human condition that is all around us, the entire existence of humanity. So hopefully that gives you a good answer. Global, you're always here and you always give such great questions, and it's always good to see you. I hope everybody has a wonderful week. I'm feeling a lot better thanks to you guys. You guys are my coffee. You guys are my boost, and I really appreciate it. I would love for you to dive into the Skylagorian dialect. I'm going to look into that. I always try to look into a topic that somebody brings up in the chat, so I really appreciate you bringing that up, Nubs. I will be happy to read more into that. I'm not a dialectic expert or a linguist, but I'm always willing to learn more about a topic, especially if it helps me learn more about history. And thank you so much for recommending it. I hope everybody has you guys are my coffee. Absolutely. And I should probably finish drinking this because I'll be away from you guys soon. But I hope you all have a great week. Take care as I put my coffee awkwardly down. And I will see you Friday at the live stream lecture. Check out the long and short form content. Think about the Patreon. If you don't like my voice, but you like read my fonts, you might want to consider the Substack, Friendly History, where I do articles on historical topics and blogs. So please check that out. Thank you and have a great Sunday and a wonderful week as the rain picks up. Love history.